Okay, so the Ramchal now is going to begin the components of the Bria. And I thought it would be interesting just to give a certain introduction to get a much greater appreciation. He's now going to go into, when God created the universe, or the whole creation actually, what are the components of the creation? And to a certain extent, what are the functions of these components, you know? But I think it would be worthwhile to give some type of an introduction. It's Kabbalistic, by the way, but I think you guys can handle it, of certain ideas which I think is very introductory and important to get into that. Okay, so I'd like to begin by an understanding that fundamentally there are different realities that are created, okay? And in a certain sense, they are divided. So I'm going to do that. The first reality clearly is the reality of God. It's the reality of whoever He is, which is completely beyond us. We have no idea who He is and so on. So I call that atzmusoi, God in His essence of whoever that is, whoever He is, whatever He is, which is a complete unknown. So let's look at that as the first reality.
Someone knows what that is?
No. No being knows what God is in terms of himself.
Even Moshe Rabbeinu?
Nobody. Zero. The greatest malachim have no concept of who He is. And I once, a long time ago when I started the Shurim, I gave a whole series of Shurim, who is God and why and so on. But right now I'm just telling you the realities. So the first reality is God, insofar as who He is, which is completely unknown. Okay? Now, the second thing is that the Baruch Shalom created, okay, a representation of Himself. It's not really Him, but it's a representation of whoever He is. And this is the beginning of the process of creation. And that representation is called the Ein Sof, the infinite. The Ein Sof, as far as we know, the Ein Sof, it is God, but it's not really Atzmusai. It is a creation that He made that represents God.
Is this Havaya?
Who? No, that's way later. Way later. So let's call that second reality, dimension. Okay? Well, let's call it the Ein Sof, the infinite being. What was that?
How He presents Himself.
That's the beginning of how He presents Himself to the Bria, yes. Okay. The interesting thing about that character, one of the most important characteristics of the Ein Sof, is that it is the only thing that exists. And it is the only thing that can exist. Okay, it's called, that's where Ein Oid Milvadoi manifests, at the Ein Sof. In other words, at that point in time, the Ein Sof, which we refer to as God, has that characteristic or attribute called Ein Oid Milvadoi, that there is nothing that exists at all besides that aspect or that being which we will call God, as a representation of God. Then what God does is He creates, it's called the Or Ein Sof, which is some kind of an area, which is, this is just to hear, nobody really needs, because how can an Ein Sof have an area? It doesn't make sense, because it's all infinite. But anyway, He does create within the Ein Sof, okay, an area that potentially can be emptied of His presence. Potentially, okay, can be emptied, so to speak, of His presence. That's called the Or Ein Sof. In other words, it's an area within, whatever that means, it's almost geometric. It's an area within the Ein Sof, it's called the Or Ein Sof, that potentially can be removed. In other words, it potentially can be devoid of the presence of Ein Sof. That's a third concept, okay? That does now exist. So there's Atzmusai, whoever He is. There's the Ein Sof, which is a representation of God. Then within the Ein Sof is now another reality called Or Ein Sof. And like I say, that Or Ein Sof is a place, whatever that means, that can be devoid of the presence of the Ein Sof. Okay? And that's very important. Why? Because with the potential of an Ein Sof removing itself in that small area, you now have the potential possibility of a zulaso, other. Remember, the Ein Sof is Einu Mavadoi, there cannot be an other. So what God does, creates a space. Look, all these are just terms to describe. We have no idea what these things really mean. I'm just giving you some type of a description physically. So the third dimension is the Or Ein Sof, right? And that's an area that can be devoid of the presence of God. Therefore, the potential of a zulaso, of an other being besides God, can now exist. Got that?
Why would God do that?
Because he wants to have others. You and me, and everybody else, right? Because in the dimension called the Ein Sof, nothing can exist. But he wants a bria. In other words, a creation cannot exist. So therefore, in some way, he has to create a capacity where his presence can be devoid or emptied. Okay? So that's the third dimension. The fourth dimension is where God empties that area of his presence. That's called the cholol, the hole, or the hollow. It's called a hollow. So there was an area that was emptied figuratively of the presence of God, and that formed a hollow, okay, which is a very important concept. Then what God did is he re-entered the hollow in a limited way, and that's called, he entered as a beam of light, so to speak. Okay, so you had the hollow, and you had a beam of the Ein Sof that went into the hollow. What that means, now, God doesn't empty himself from any area. What he does is, whatever is in that area cannot possibly experience or see God. You see, so it's not like God left, it's that anything in that hollow cannot experience God.
Different levels of concealment.
Yes, yes, that's right.
But he's there.
He's always there, yeah. You know, it's like imagine you walk into a room, right? And instead of shutting off the lights, somebody paints your eyeglasses black, so you don't see anything. You're in the room, but there's light, but you cannot see the light. Okay, so that's the fourth dimension.
It's the Kav, right?
Who?
The Kav.
The Kav, yes.
And this is
In Kabbalah, it's called the Kav.
And this is Hashem's presence, or
That is his presence.
the energy or the presence?
The presence in a limited way, whatever that means. In Kabbalah, it's described as the cholol, the hollow, and that there's a kav, a line or a beam, a ray of Ein Sof, of God, that enters the hollow. Whatever that means that there is the presence of God in this hollow. However, it's not the presence that's called the Ein Sof, because then it would completely annihilate the hollow. You see. Got that? So we have Atzmusai, whoever he is in and of himself. The second thing we have is Ein Sof. That's the representation of God, which is infinite. Okay, and the major attribute of that is Eino Mavadoi. Then what God does, he wants to bring in other, something else besides him. So he creates what's called an area in the Ein Sof, it's called the Or Ein Sof, that potentially can be, his presence can be removed, so to speak. You see? And therefore, potentially, there can be another thing called zulaso, an other. Got that? The fourth dimension is where he does remove himself, not literally but figuratively, from that Or Ein Sof, and that becomes a hollow. And the fifth dimension, he now re-enters this area in a limited way. And therefore, the creation will now experience God in a very limited way. So that cholol, or that hollow, can now have a zulaso, an other, and it also can have God that can be experienced by this other. So that fifth dimension now allows that to occur. Everybody got that so far? It's fundamental Kabbalah, you should know. I mean, the Sifri Kabbalah, the Eitz Chaim and so on, will describe it by a cholo, by a kav and so on. They'll describe it sort of like geometrically. But I'm telling you what it means in terms of, okay? Now.
What does it mean? I mean, this is,
I'm doing this as an intro. Yeah, go ahead.
What does it mean as a beam as opposed to just an area, so to speak?
Well, a beam is what? It's a beam it's a beam that's limited.
Oh, so they mean that
it doesn't expand.
The fact that it's a beam means in relation to what God used
to be. Correct. It's a beam.
And where's the Shekhinah?
Wait.
Yeah.
Forget the Shekhinah. That's later on.
So Enan Milvado just means nothing else was created?
No, that the being that was created is the only thing that can exist.
In existence.
It's not only the only thing that exists. Enan Milvado, that is the only thing that really has existence. Period. Whatever that means.
But there's Atzmuso behind that.
There's Atzmuso behind that. The best way you can describe it is there's a concept of the sun. That's Atzmuso. Then the sun shoots off light waves, right? That would be Ein Sof. And that goes toward the earth, And then the earth, but in any case, that's a sort of like a description, see? So therefore that basically means that there are 5 levels of dimensions that encompass God. Okay? Got that?
Quick question. Do you have an example for the 4th dimension when Hashem removes himself and creates a hollow? How is that conceptualized?
Well, the hollow simply means that it is devoid of the presence of God in a figurative way, not literally, but that the fact that there's a hollow, there can now be an other thing. Before that hollow, nothing can exist because the Ein Sof completely fills everything. But because there's a hollow, you can now have the concept of an other being, potentially. Then when the hollow is made, right, it's made, then other being can exist. You see, not yet. And then what re-enters that hollow, the first thing that re-enters is now God in a new form, so to speak, right? Which is, it's sort of like a limited Ein Sof. It's a contradiction in terms, right? But it means God now enters in a way where the attribute of Ein Milvado is annulled. Because if it still was operative, nothing could exist even in the cholo. So when God re-enters as a kav, again, it's a line, whatever, that means in this hollow can be another existing being. Because God has now limited, what he's really done is he's removed the attribute of Ein Milvado, and therefore others can now exist in that hollow.
But
got that?
Not be equal, because only God exists on his own accord.
Yes.
Anything other will never be.
No, that other will never, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm being very brief here, but this is fundamental understanding of what creation is.
Halal is created through Tzimtzum.
Who?
Tzimtzum.
Yes, I was about to next word. I see we have a makubal here. Now, what's important to remember, okay, is that, wait a minute, how does this all occur, right? And the answer is there's a specific operation, right, that is created. And that is the operation called Tzimtzum. Tzimtzum means to contract, to restrict, or to remove. You'll notice in each one of these dimensions, God slowly removes himself more and more. You see? That means the divine presence itself can be concealed at different levels, different gradations. What does that is an operation called Tzimtzum. It's a very important concept because it means that God can be concealed. That's what it means. To whatever extent he wants to be concealed. And he created that, yes. The Atzmusoi remember, in whoever he is, there is no tzimtzum. There is nothing but him, and it's not even Eloim B'vado. It's something that is so far beyond what we can possibly understand. Even the Ein Sof we don't understand. We have no idea what that means. How can there be a being that is the only thing that can exist, not that does exist, that can exist? So God has to remove the can. Nothing can. There has to remove the can't exist into can exist. So that has to come first, and then he creates the cholol, and he re-enters it in like a new face, so to speak.
So what the angels?
Wait, you're not up to angels yet. I'm telling you the 5 different steps until we get to a hollow, plus the entrance or the new form, so to speak, of God, as he will now relate to everything in that hollow.
So the kav itself is not done through tzimtzum.
It is. The kav is a tzimtzum of the Orient Soif, which is a tzimtzum of the Ein
Meaning,
Soif.
instead of filling the whole void and just reverting back to Ein Sof, it's only limited, so it itself is created through the operation of tzimtzum.
Yeah, the kav itself.
Otherwise, it would fill the whole halal and square.
Immediately, yeah.
Are these-
Got that so far?
Are these levels different spiritual world?
No, they're not spiritual. God is not spiritual. God is the concept of God and his gradations of concealment has nothing to do with spirituality. Nothing. We don't know. As far as we know, there's a physical world, material world, and there's a spiritual world. But that's the next series of 5 steps, I'm going to tell you. I'm giving you the actual order of creation as it is brought down in Kabbalah. And, this will give you sort of like a GPS of where we're at and so on,
A question.
Got that?
If I may, these gradations, are they authentic, for lack of a better word, Hashem morphing, or is it internal, our perception?
It's our perception. God doesn't morph. You know what I'm saying?
So it's an illusion, maybe. That's what we don't.
Yes.
That he's concealed, because the concealment is him also.
It's also him. And all of this is an illusion. It's all an illusion. We don't experience any of this stuff.
Real.
Yeah, it's a real illusion.
Before?
I'm sorry?
Did you hear the glasses?
Did I hear?
I gave the example. It's like, say you walk into and you have glasses and you paint the glasses black, right? And all of a sudden everything is dark, right? So what changed? Wasn't the outside world? It's bright. What changed is your ability to perceive. In other words, the concealment is sort of like a damage done in you, not in what's real. You see, that's why we just learned in the previous that when God never reduces his hashpor, his illumination. It's just that you create a barrier. You see, so in that sense, God created a barrier which has nothing to do with your acts, but it is a barrier nonetheless. You see, but all of these are ideas or dimensions of reality, right? That is from our perspective. You see, but look, the 5 different dimensions I've just told you is really the dimensions of the divine. We're not even in this world yet. We are in the gradations of restriction of the divine itself, of God. We're not even into this world yet. We're not even into the spiritual world yet. This is to get there, you see. So we now have a hollow, so to speak, that has a certain quantity, I hate to use that word, of God, like God, in order to allow others to exist. And the fundamental operation of that is called Tzimtzum. You see, Tzimtzum is the possibility, it's an operation of God presence being diminished. You see? And that's a very important idea, because that sets the whole stage of man's avodah. You see? Because, I'll just mention it now, because the whole task of the Jews to do what? What is tikkun? You can understand much better now.
To bring God's presence into this world.
So therefore, what are you really doing? You are reversing the tzimtzum. Interesting. That's really what you're doing. You are reversing the tzimtzum. And the power of a Jew, this is why he's the greatest creature ever made, is that he can actually dial the amount of tzimtzum in the Bria. God has given the power to a Jew. He said, hey. Well, he didn't say hey, but he said, yeah. What he did, he says, there's a concept called tzimtzum, right? And there's an amount of presence that can potentially be here. I'm going to give you the controls of that tzimtzum operation. That's what a Jew is. I didn't say why a Jew, and there is nothing in the Bria that can do that. Because we can dial more God or less God. You know what I'm saying? Which is that's the greatest power of creation. Because we know that more God is incredible existence, and less God, which is called Hester, is terrible existence. So the question is, well, who can determine that? And the answer is the Jew. Only a Jew can do that. He can increase or decrease the presence of God, which really means he can increase the operation called tzimtzum, or he can reverse the tzimtzum by decreasing the tzimtzum and therefore letting God more in. That's really what a Jew is. And
had no Hester.
no, he did.
Sure.
His Hester was way down the line. What I'm talking about is really the highest that you can go. This is the reality called God and its gradations through the operation of tzimtzum. So in the end result, what do you have? You have a hollow and you have a kav, which is God entering that hollow, means that God re-enters. Not that he re-enters, he never left, but he is now allowing more of himself to be perceived in a very limited way. Because if it was total, there's no possibility, because besides God, there's nothing else. You see, so we are now up to the point where the reality of God is now manifest in different degrees or gradations, and this sets the stage for a new reality called the Bria. The Bria hasn't happened yet. Creation hasn't happened. First, God had to alter himself, so to speak, because without that, there's no creation, you see? So that's where we're up to. 5 ideas. Atzmusoi, Ein Sof, or Ein Sof, the Cholol, and the Kav that enters the Cholol. And now it's possible to have a zulaso, which means another being besides God. So the next series of operations, right, is now the creation of another in this hollow. It's funny, the whole creation exists in a little hollow, all of it, and I'm not even talking about the 13.7 billion light years. If you think about that the scientists estimate that the length of the universe is 13.7 billion light years, and a light year is 6 trillion miles. That means light will travel in 1 year. If it goes 186,000 miles a second, it will travel in 1 year. That's called a light year. It's a distance, not time. It will travel 6 trillion miles in 1 year. Not bad. Yeah. And at that speed, it's incredible, But anyway, I think the nearest star, Alpha Centauri, or was it Proxima Centauri? I think it's 4 light years away, which means the nearest star is 24 trillion miles away. That's the nearest star. I mean, other than our sun. Pretty far. You think about the concept of trillion. And this is the nearest star. The Andromeda Galaxy, which is the nearest galaxy, right, is 2 million light years away. It's so it's 2 million times 6 light year, 6 trillion. That's
6 trillion or 600 trillion?
No. The Andromeda Galaxy, which is the nearest galaxy, is 2 million, if I remember correctly, 2 million light years away.
What is a galaxy?
A galaxy is 100 billion stars clustered into an island. And there are over 100 billion galaxies.
But is it
I mean, the numbers are beyond.
And that's what we just discovered. No, wait another 10 years or 20 years.
Oh, and no, that's just
And
that's
next year they discovered that
that's just the physical universe.
Yeah.
No, that's the lowest. I didn't even get to this physical universe. I still have to go through the worlds of Kabbalah and so on. You know. So could you imagine the distance or the size of the Bria? You know, I'm just telling you what the physical universe is. You know.
all this is created in a hollow? It's still finite, though.
Yeah, the hollow is finite. Yeah.
Though it seems infinite.
Well, relatively speaking, you know, it's infinite, but it's all in this little hollow, you know, and the rest of the space, if you can use that word, is God. God occupies. We don't know what that means because God doesn't occupy any space. You know, what?
It's not a space.
It's not space. We don't know what that means, but there's God and this little grain of sand that is the hollow. And that's it, you know? And then in that grain of sand is this world, the physical universe, which is 13.8 billion times light years, 6 trillion. Now, I forget what miles, that's and that's the galaxy. You see, it's humongous. I mean, it's just nothing that we can possibly conceive of. But this basically is a divinity. The first aspect of creation is God has to alter, so to speak, not literally, but figuratively, he has to alter himself. Because if he doesn't, then you cannot have a zulaso, you cannot have an other at all. Because Eino Mavade prevents anything from existing. So in some way he has to conceal or to cover up that entire idea. So those are the 5 different stages of the creation, or the beginning, or rather the necessary requirements to have a bria. See? Got that? And remember, the key concept is Tzimtzum, because that's the operation that will diminish the presence of God. And that power has been given over to the Jew. We can regulate Tzimtzum. That's what the Jew can do, which no other creature in the Bria, in creation, can do. I don't care how, the greatest malachim cannot influence the presence or absence of God, not even by a nanometer. And we can bring him in, push him out. You know what I'm saying? It's astounding what a Jew can do. You see, and you know, it's okay. We got that kind of stuff. We got it. And you thought the New York Times had everything in it, right? Or the Wall Street Journal. What was that?
You're at the point now where God's going to create a spiritual and physical.
Correct. I'm at that point.
Why
And the
would God?
Torah begins in the beginning. What you were saying up to now is at the beginning?
Yes. This is the beginning.
With the Bereshit?
Before Bereshit.
Before. No, before.
Before Bereshit.
Well,
No.
it's in.
This is what you described.
The Torah begins with Bereshis. The first letter is A. Why? Because it's,
Aleph is Ein Sof.
yes, because Aleph would mean only a Bria, creation that only consists of God and the different levels. But the fact that there's a Beis means there's 2 fundamental things in this creation. One is God, and the other is the zulaso, the other. That's why it's a Beis. Because Aleph would have meant no zulaso, no other being. But the fact that Torah begins with a Beis indicates that there will always be 2 fundamental entities, God and the creation, which is an other, you see? And that will never disappear.
He did all this.
What was that?
He did all this and gave us in our hands this koyach
Yeah.
for our good.
Only for our good.
Only for our good.
Yeah.
He didn't need
If
it.
the Jew ever realized his power, I think he plots.
Yeah.
If you realize that your acts Now, the question, of course, is how do you regulate the tzimtzum? How do you regulate this ability to bring God in, expand, if you want to use that word, to expand the presence of God and to contract the presence of God? That is the acts of man, or the acts of the Jew. What we have no conception is that when you do a mitzvah, you are really dialing tzimtzum. That's the consequence of a mitzvah. You are actually influencing the presence of God through a mitzvah. And if you sin, you are, again, dialing the mitzvah of tzimtzum. The tzimtzum, but in this case, right, so to speak, you're reversing you're increasing the tzimtzum, where there's more presence. There's less presence. You see? So we can actually determine the amount of God and the amount of absence of God by our acts. You see? That's the concept of a neshama. Okay? That's what a neshama can do. And it's not just a neshama. The only one that can do this is a being that is called Adam, which is the next topic of discussion. Adam, man. He's the only being that can do this. Okay? No, and if you're not called an Adam, you cannot do this. That's why, unfortunately, Goyim, non-Jews, have absolutely no connection to the Tzimtzum process. Nothing. Unless they become Jewish. And obviously, no matter what they think, only a person who has an neshama, soul, of the completion of a Jewish neshama. Although everybody has a neshama, even Goyim have a neshama. They have a real soul, spiritual soul. But the level of that neshama is substantially reduced. Somebody has the neshama of a Jew, which we'll talk about. That person can fully operate the tzimtzum.
They can influence anything?
Who's they?
A guy.
A guy can influence his own mazel, but he cannot connect in any way to the creation itself. You see? In other words, if a guy acts in a certain way, a good way, then he will influence the hashpah of God, but he cannot reduce the presence or absence. What he can control to a certain extent is what's the level of illumination and hester of whatever presence of God is there. He cannot influence the body of God, if you want to use that expression, but he can influence the emanation of God insofar as he aids and or detracts from the being. See the difference? We can actually influence the amount of Shekhinah. They can't.
They can influence level?
They can influence the level of the emanations in terms of themselves, but they cannot influence the Shekhinah. We can. We can make the illumination of God less or more depending on our actions, and that is really what a Jew is. That's why a Jew is the greatest creation of all. A Jew is the greatest creation of all. There's nothing that can equal the power of a Jew.
Like we have the power to push like an atomic bomb.
Yeah. Oh no. It's much more powerful than an atomic bomb. What's atomic bomb? Big deal. It's where an atom splits and gives off energies, mass is reconverted into energy. Big deal. We're talking about God. We're talking about the ability to expand or reduce the presence of a divine of God. Well, what greater power is there? What else can you do?
To connect this to last week's shir, what you're saying now is that when we, like as Jews, we could bring back the presence of Hashem, meaning we could remove that barrier you were talking about.
Yes. Yeah. That's right.
And a
But
guy
you don't
can only do
increase the
it on
presence himself, just ourselves, close and open. But it's there at the same level.
Yeah.
And the guy could only do it on a personal level. Cannot do it on
Only on a personal. He cannot do it to the bria.
Okay.
He cannot influence the creation, just to what's coming to him. More mazel, less mazel, you know. But he cannot influence the whole creation.
He can scratch his glasses a little bit and let the light go, cover it. So it's basically
Yeah, well, yeah. But in any case, so these are the 5 different dimensions that Kabbalah talks about, okay? And these are the dimensions in terms of the divine presence, God himself. And remember, we're not even talking yet about the creation itself. That's next.
So Tikkun Olam is really, the Olam there simply means world, but it actually is referring to Elam.
Well, I'm going to mention that, yeah. Tikkun of the Olam is really to remove concealment, or to bring in more presence of God, you know.
The word concealment in Hebrew got the same root as world.
Yes, I'm going to mention that, yes. That's the difference. That's okay. Yeah. That's why after this is done, all the other worlds after that are called worlds. Olam, which the Hebrew root is helem, because now the creation itself will now always have some aspect of concealment of God. Whereas the other aspects they're not concealed, they're just, perceived as being concealed. But really they're not concealed. Even the hollow, the hollow really is not concealed. It's just that hollow is concealed enough where others can exist in that hollow. You see, but it's not really concealed. You see, you see the key. There's a key posuk in the Navi, which is really beyond belief. Where the Hashem says, "Ani lo shenisi," I have not changed. What? You have not changed? What do you mean? There was God before the creation, and there's God after the creation. So maybe there was no change in you, but there was a change in what you did. You see? So that pasuk reveals an incredible concept that God didn't do anything. And we don't understand what that means. God has never changed before or after creation, because really nothing really exists. It's all an illusion. That's why I love these guys that walk around, they think they're God's gift to the world. They don't even exist. Forget about being God's gift. That's why gaiva is the most most insane midah you can have. Because you don't even exist. And you're gonna walk around. Well, I'm somebody. I'm better than you. You don't even exist.
Tzimtzum is not real. You say?
No, not from the Ani lo shenisi. No, God never did Tzimtzum. God never did anything. Well, okay, if I could explain to you, I wouldn't be here. No, we don't understand what that means. That means, in reality, God did nothing. He never made a creation. I'm not giving the shir. You guys are not out there listening to it, maybe. But anyway.
It's one big holocaust.
It's reality.
Yeah, well, it's like, But and we have no comprehension of that God does not change at all. It's just that relative to ourselves, there's change and there's this and that, But if you want to say, but at the reality of God, nothing has happened. You see?
And every second, he's constantly making this happen.
Yeah. Well, the whole concept of time, I once told you, right? There are 7 fundamental elements of the Bria, right? These are the fundamental fabric of everything. I once told you that, right? What was it? There is time, space, matter, energy, right? Life, consciousness, and motion. That's it. So there's the 7 fundamental ideas of, let's put it this way, there's 7 fundamental points, elements of a creation. But all of that exists outside of God. God does not occupy, doesn't exist in time. No such thing as time, when we don't know what that means. He doesn't exist in space. Well, he doesn't need space to be occupied to allow himself to exist in. God is Mekoimo Shel Olam. God is the space of everything, so to speak. He's not material, right? He's not material, either physical or spiritual. He's not energy, right? God is not living in the sense that we understand life. We don't know what his existence is, you know. It seems that he's living, you know. Does God have consciousness? Not really. Then what do you mean conscious? That's awareness, you know. But he is conscious, but we don't understand. We do not understand any of his properties, and they are completely different from us. And God is certainly not in motion, you know.
He's conscious in a different way.
Yeah. Consciousness is a created idea. It's weird, isn't it?
I thought the consciousness is the self-aware. That's the chelik l'kam mimal. I thought that's the one property.
Yeah, but that chelik l'kam mimal, that mimal is a nivra.
Yeah.
That mimal is a nivra, isn't it? Yeah, well, chelik l'kam mimal of whatever he created to represent him, but he's none of these things.
But the Ein Sof or that mimal that does have consciousness.
No, probably also not. It's probably at the level of the cholol. You know, at the level where he enters as a kav. You know, at that level you can have all these elements and so on, you know. But at God's level, all of this doesn't exist. It's unknown.
Chelik of the Ein Sof. Chelik l'kam mimal. So we have to have something that replicates the Ein Sof.
Yeah, we're a chelik of the kav, not the Ein Sof.
Not the Ein Sof. Kav.
Yeah, the kav. Because the attribute of the Ein Sof is Ein Mavada. It's not going to be a replica of that. I can be a chelik of that. You know, we can only exist after all the tzimtzumim, after contraction. You know, and now a zulaso, an other, can pop into the bria, can pop into existence, so to speak. You know. But you know, so it's an important idea. These are the different levels or steps of God Himself, sort of like preparing Himself to make a bria. You see? Now the question, of course, is what's the bria, and so on. And I'm going to talk about that. What is the creation, and therefore, from that idea, what are the components? What is the purpose within these ideas that I have explained? Look, it's very abstract. The truth is, we can barely grasp, have a handle on any of this, you know. But still, you have to know it's not simple. That these are ideas that are brought down Kabbalah. And they are critical ideas, you know.
Why can't these realities of God be called olamos if they're essentially tzimtzum?
But not reality.
But they're not. To us, that's tzimtzum. See, to us, that's tzimtzum, but to him,
nothing's tzimtzum.
Mental, say it like this. We asked the Shiloh in the middle of the week. We spoke about this, and you said very strong that till Ak, you can't see it as a separate entity. You see the connection too strong, so it doesn't look as, even though the Tzimtzumim, it's still connected to the main source. You don't see it as a separate, standalone entity.
There's no such thing. See, the creation itself has what's called zulaso, others. You see, and the concept of an other means a separation. On the level of God, there's no separation. You see, so the fact that there's no separation at all of him, it's gradations of himself, but there's no separation. There's no other. The concept of helem is the concept of other. That's really what it is. But in a universe, so to speak, a dimension where there is no other, there's merely gradations of appearances of God. Right? That's not a helem, because he's still there. It's only when you get here that he's concealed and there's all others. So that's the illusion of plurality. That's really what it is. This world has an illusion of plurality. Plurality means many. It's an illusion, you see. So with that illusion of plurality, others, then you have Helem. And there's other ideas. What? What was that?
So in the beginning, it's only gradations of presence, but there's still only God.
There's only God, yeah. It's a tremendous difference.
It's just interesting that a woman has to have contractions before having a baby, before giving birth to a baby.
Yeah.
Is there any connection? Tzimtzum before creating a bria.
It's more tzimtzum, that's more tzimtzum. Contractions are like tzimtzum.
Well, those contractions are really to expel.
Right.
You know, God's contractions is to allow to exist. If that's called an expulsion, I can think about that.
Like Kessie, we might have covered this, but
who? Yeah.
We might have covered this, but
yes.
It's where my thinking process is going. Hashem in all his complete totality of everything.
Yeah.
Like you said, I am who I am, he said, right? To mobilize this effort, initiative, rather than just being in a static state, it's an immense thing he's done for us. Why? Why say, I'm going to move and I'm going to mobilize, I'm going to not just stay in a constant static, all complete.
What you mean? Why did he? What's his motive?
Yeah.
So we know what the motive is. Hatova, hatova, to bestow an infinite state of goodness on a human being. That's it. Why he wants to do that is unknown. We don't know the motive of the motive. I mean, God doesn't need this, of course. But what he wants to do is create a being that he can allow that being to experience God. Yeah, that is the end all of everything. Why he wants to do that, we don't know. There are many. Obviously, look, there could be. God could have made an infinite amount of creations besides this one, right? And they're all experiencing something else. God has never revealed the totality of his acts, and so on, So there could be, imagine if there are infinite amount of creations. Each creation not duplicating any concept in the next one, or the next one, or the next one. So we can't even understand, we don't know what this creation is. I mean, like I said, there's 13.7 billion light years, and that's just the Olam Asiyah. That's not even Olam Asiyah, that's called the Olam HaShofel. And above that is the 7 Rekiim, the 7 heavens and all that.
And that's
which is,
Olam Asiyah?
it's all Olam Asiyah, And then you get to Yetzirah, so we have no idea, there's billions of malachim. It's like it's just beyond belief what's out there.
Where is Havaya in all of this?
Havaya is in the Bria itself. That's a manifestation of God in the creation itself. It's one of the spheres, actually.
So what are those Rekiim, 7 Rekiim? What's the function of that? After the galaxies and the stars and everything, there's Rekiim?
Then you have Rekiim, yeah.
Because
they have different things going on in the different Rekiim. You have different things. It's like what Yetzirah about.
And
you have
Gashmi?
Malachim, and you have,
No, the Rekiim are Gashmi, or that's...
No, that's spiritual. No, that's a mistake. People think Olam Asiyah is not just physical, it is also spiritual. What do you think a ghost is? What is a ghost? A ghost is not spiritual, but it's not physical. You see, it's a semi kind of being,
We were taught ghosts don't exist.
Whoever told you that never saw a ghost,
No, where's it from? What is a ghost? Nothing smart, in our heritage. Where's
A ghost is an neshama, basically, that it still retains a certain physicality to it, but it's not. It's more of a mental physicality.
It can't go up. It can't
go up. It's stuck.
That's a
Stuck.
It's stuck. It's got to do a tikkun.
And it hangs out in those Rekiim
It hangs out in your house.
everywhere.
But isn't that in the Shema?
all over.
Yes.
No.
Shadim are different. No, they're different guys. It's a very complex place. There's a lot going on here, No, he's going to talk about Shadim. He's going to talk about Amchaz, and he's going to talk about
And the
Shadim.
Shadim on the Rekias, also they go up to the
No, Shadim are in this world. They are spiritual, quasi-spiritual entities that are here, are in this physical world, and they differ, There's a whole bunch. There's many different types of beings that God created. Each one that has a specific function. And so on. There's a sultan, the Sitra Achra. He's a being. And he's got his Malchi Chavola. He's got his old crew and all that. A lot of stuff. It's a very complicated world.
Is it the Achra in those 7 Rekiim?
No, he's below. He's in the Sitra Achra. He's in a dimension which is lower than Asiyah. It's greatest concealment of Einad Mavadoy by the Sitra Achra.
Why was it kept from common knowledge among Cloud Israel?
Why?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't commonly known.
Kabbalah. This is
Yeah, it's it's Kabbalistic, it's mystical, it's esoteric.
Side.
It's Soid. Yeah. Look, there are restrictions on knowing Soid,
Yeah, you gotta be 40, you gotta be married.
Yeah, but that's not true anymore. There are many, the Goyin, Ramchal, Rabbi Avram, Azuloi, the Chesed Avram. They all, and after 1492 it ended. The need to know Shas, Poskim, everything, 40, that ended. They say clearly, now anybody can learn Kabbalah. I mean, you have to have requirements for it, don't get me wrong, but it's not the requirements that used to be, because
Why
once
that
the...
date, 1492.
The Inquisition. Well, that was the beginning of the expansion of the Golas to America. It's really when it happened, 1492. Columbus. So therefore, the Tekufa changed. You should know one thing: when there's always a zelu mazeh, this as parallels another. Once science was revealed, science is really the origin of the physical universe. That's really what it is. It's the understanding at a gut level. The fundamental structure of the physical universe. Once that was released, so then the spiritual information is also released. It's really what happened, you see. So,
That's when they found the Zohar?
what was that?
That's when they found the Zohar?
No, the Zohar was in 1292 or something like that. No. But that itself is, I once gave a whole shir on that. No, that was 1240s, the beginning of the end.
They give that date, 1492, that everything changed.
Yeah, Chesed Avram, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, they give that date, yeah.
And what does he say? Why that date?
Like I say, it was the beginning of the weakening of Edom. America's the weakening of Edom. Europe was terrible.
What date is in Hebrew?
Which one, 1492? Well, when they were expelled, was it Tisha B'Av?
Yeah.
Tisha B'Av, yeah.
About what year is in Hebrew, 1492? Do you know?
Oh, I don't know.
Just
Let's go get out.